So you mentioned the risk of. You mentioned the risk of nuclear weapons, the
Yes,
risk
I
of
did.
nuclear proliferation. So there's one policy that's kind of being discussed as a means to reduce the risk of a country, any country using a nuclear weapon, and that would be implementing a no first use policy for nuclear weapons, which would basically be saying, we're never going to use a nuclear weapon first. Will you support a policy like that?
It's interesting because it's an interesting idea. And it's something which that phrase had never been proposed to me before. One of the things that I feel strongly about as a presidential candidate is that I think as a candidate, as with the president, you shouldn't just talk off the cuff. Let me think about that. It certainly sounds wonderful. I can't even imagine. But before I just say, oh yes, that sounds fabulous, please let me think about that for a few minutes. At first hearing, I can't even imagine you dropping a nuclear bomb. First of all, even dropping a nuclear bomb. Dropping a nuclear bomb first. So 99.9% of me says, yes, of course. But there are cameras here, so let me be careful. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, let me just sort of follow up on the same theme. In 1968, the United States became a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And it was basically a deal where the countries that didn't have nuclear weapons said, we won't try to get them, and the countries that already had them said, we'll get together and work on getting rid of them.
Yes.
The nuclear countries have not lived up to our side of that bargain.
No.
So I'm wondering what you would do as president to get us back on track to worldwide negotiations for the total elimination of nuclear weapons.
It's quite the opposite. We've lost, and some of us are old enough to remember, we have even lost the popular consciousness that these things are horrible and we should do everything possible to get rid of them. There is so much money made. Does anybody here know how many nuclear bombs the United States has?
7,000?
Somewhere around 7,000, supposedly. And every nuclear bomb that exists today makes Hiroshima and Nagasaki look like a pinprick. That's what we're dealing with here. And that's why I mentioned it's got to be the consciousness of the American people. The Trump administration is currently uninterested in the extension of the last round of talks. This change, and this is exactly what I mean, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I'm running for president. We're having presidential campaigns, and it took a couple of girls to bring up the subject. And I'm not saying anything that every Democratic candidate doesn't know. It's what we're willing to name. You know, it's not enough to have moral values, you have to stand for your moral values. It's not enough to know something, you have to be willing to speak about something. And that's what we're living with today. So absolutely, and now what Germany has done is Germany has just said, we're going off nuclear. So you and I should be talking about not only nuclear bombs, we should be talking about the use of nuclear energy, period. You know, a lot of times when people talk about getting off fossil fuels, even then they'll talk about getting off fossil fuels for energy. And they see that that's dirty. But we should also be having a conversation, not only about fossil fuels being dirty, but about nuclear energy being potentially dangerous. We're just kind of hoping it'll all be okay. That's the basic political consciousness of the American people today. That is the biggest danger to our future. We're all just kind of hoping it'll be okay. And we are weighing in every 2 years or every 4 years. Meanwhile, corporate lobbyists are weighing in every hour of every day. And the influence of money, represented by such forces as they, is so nefarious as to be the cancer underlying all our cancers. We're in the midst of the catastrophe, because this is pre-catastrophe. When the people are asleep, the catastrophes are almost inevitable. You know, I come from a corner of the culture where sometimes people will say, well, don't focus on the negative because that will make it grow. Can you imagine an oncologist saying, you know, it's stage 1, but let's just ignore it. It's only stage one, and if we deal with it, it might grow. No, some things get worse because you don't talk about them, because you don't deal with them. And we have so much malaise and so much depression and so much upset in this country because we're not talking about these things. Because we all can feel there's a lot going on that we're not talking about. You know, sometimes, and then people say, well, if I think about it, I get upset. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? Sometimes the fact that you're upset is a sign of mental health. It's not a sign of mental health that in this country that we're just have this kind of cheap and easy, you know, yellow smiley face that we're just putting over everything and not talking about things that matter. Martin Luther King Jr. said, your life begins to end on the day you stop talking about things that matter. Now, this is the thing. American democracy is radical. It is radical. The vision of the founders was